What's up? My name's Glue welcome back to the channel, and this one's pretty important. This is a pretty big video because I'm going to be covering the faction that's like the current big bad in this edition, at least in the start of this edition. Because in 10th edition, with the release like now officially out, if you have your Leviathan boxes, good for you. I got mine. I'm painting up my half, the Raven Guard half that I'm creating. But this current 10th edition of Warhammer is following the 4th Tyrannic Tyranid War, which is the biggest Tyrannic war we've ever seen. Though that's every Tyrannic war, because they're not going to follow up like the next one with one that's smaller and worse. That's a dumb move. So today we're going to be going into all the different hive fleets that the Tyranids actually have. And to keep this a little concise, because there's a lot, we're only going to be covering the main, well, used to be playable hive fleets, and subfactions aren't really a thing anymore in 10th edition. A little sad, but we'll see when the new codexes drop. But we're just going to be going through them, explaining their history, what they do, fun stuff like that. And as well, real quick, what is a hive fleet? We should actually define that. So a Tyranid hive fleet is essentially what it sounds like. It is a bioorganic fleet with their ships, these living ships, like big bug ships that all travel around finding different planets and just eating them. Essentially, a good way you can think about it is there's a hive mind somewhere in the universe that is every single Tyranid is linked to. And the Tyranids have a Gestalt consciousness. The more brains around them, Tyranid brains, the smarter they are and the higher connected they are to the hive mind. So picture essentially there's this big nebulous glob somewhere, and each hive fleet is almost like a tentacle that's reaching through. This tentacle might branch off into smaller ones, but primarily it's just one big body that is moving through the galaxy. And they're all disparate from each other, because each hive fleet is actually defined by a lot of different factors. The biomass they eat, the enemies they fight, a lot of different factors that affect how they act, how they fight, and just what strategies they employ. Because Nids, despite being, brainless hive mind bugs, these dudes are pretty fucking smart. They got some tactics, surprisingly. And that's what we're going to be going into. First up, we have my personal favorite hive fleet. That's going to be Hively Behemoth, which is actually the first documented Tyranid hive fleet we've encountered. Technically, there's another one, like Ouroboros. That's one that came chronologically before, but it wasn't a major deal. It was also a failed name for them, because Tyranids get their name from the fact that they destroyed the planet of Tyran, so they were like, oh, the Tyranids. Whoa. I highly respect Hively Behemoth. For the very brief time in my life, I was playing Magic the Gathering, a very depressing time for many people, I know. I was a red-green player. I highly respect the tactic of, there's a problem, you throw giant monsters at it until it goes away. That's Hively Behemoth's whole deal. They have the giant fucking monsters in the Tyranid lists, which are so fun. These big-ass models are dope. But these are also the guys who first appeared, the first Tyrannic War, and the dudes who invaded Macragge. We have Papa Smurf himself, Marnius Caligar, chapter master of the Ultramarines. Dude got his arms and a leg eaten off by a swarm lord. Like, they got onto Macragge and fucked it up. Eventually, they killed all the Nids off of Macragge, but that is a major first step, is literally destroying the blueberries. Pretty big deal for a faction that's kind of memed on that they never lose. Fucking up Macragge wasn't the only thing they were meant to do, because in reality, it was actually a big ploy by the hive mind to almost like get a nice taster sample of what this galaxy had to offer, like, ooh, all the tasty biomass that's just hanging about. And then once they got a bunch, they just shotgun blasted everything across the galaxy and created a bunch of splinter fleets, all going out in different direction with the excess biomass that the main hive fleet gathered, and it started making problems for literally everybody. This was the first foray that the Nids had, and they made great use of it in the years to come. And next up, we have another really dope hive fleet. Like, this is probably my second favorite. So this is Hive Gorgon, which got their start fighting the Tau. And because of the Tau, they kind of got some funny augmentations. Now, the main thing is this Hive fleet is insanely adaptable. Like, so fucking adaptable. The main reason is because the Tau are also highly adaptable and have a major technological advantage over a lot of factions in 40k. They're like one of the only ones that's still developing cool new tech. And the Nids made use of this. The two methods that this shows up in Hive Gorgon is they rapidly create new Nids. Like new creatures just appear. They're like, fucking make a quick little design, toss them out, go kill like a Tau mech. I don't know any of the Tau mech names, I'm realizing, because, you know, unpopular opinion, Tau bad bottom text. But that's their main kind of version. The cooler version is that Hively Gorgon is highly poisonous, but in a really dope way. They have this gland full of like semi-sentient spores that develop a kind of biological profile of the people they're fighting, brings it back into like the synaptic link. This is like the big thing that links all the Hive fleet Tyranids together and creates a potent poison built for the enemy they're killing. So as they're killing you, they're getting your DNA, they're getting your information, and a couple generations of Nids later, a single scratch of their talon or a blast from their like bio bug guns, you're immediately melting. Like, that's fucking terrifying and dope. This is the coolest thing ever. Then next up we got Hive Kraken, the tricksy Nids. Now imagine you're fighting the bug version of White Scars or Raven Guard just pushed together, because these guys are really tactical. They're the ones who go for wild flanking maneuvers. They see a slight weakness in your front line, they are immediately spear tip ramming through it. They probe defenses, find the weak spot, pour in, or are flanking in with wild, just flanking attacks from nowhere. And like last thing you know, just all your like dudes are dead in your backline. It's insane. And the actual development of when they popped out was really interesting, because after the first Tyrannic War, the Nids came out of the Eastern Fringes. So the Imperium put a lot of dudes in the Eastern Fringes. And a lot of the planets weren't a big fan of really heightened military control, started collapsing. The government got a little upset, like, why the fuck are we like defending against bugs? Like that first Hive fleet, that's probably all of them. That's the entire Nid population probably. There's definitely not more waiting around the corner. And in that moment of intense turmoil, that's when they struck. That's their deal. They strike in and cause massive confusion and chaos so they can strike easier and kill their prey. Next up, we got Hive Yormagander, which is largely in like tunneling and ambush tactics. Another pretty cool Hive fleet tactics-wise, because imagine you're a guardsman trying to fight off the Tyranid threat, and essentially you roll up to a planet to realize you have a bunch of mobile miniature Sarlacc pits coming at you. Are obviously terrifying. They build giant ambush like tunnel complexes and just like will burrow out of the ground, just appear out of nowhere. You're not safe in anywhere on the planets they're invading. And oh boy, it gets worse, because Hively Yormagander has this really fun tactic where they pull a Starship Troopers and just throw asteroids at the planet. But it's worse, because they attach myoptic spores onto these asteroids. These like shell drop pods full of bugs. So they throw these asteroids at your planet, orbital bombardment. Your defenses are being blown up by asteroids being flung into your planet, and then Tyranids pour out. So it's like a double whammy. That it's so dope. I wish their paint scheme didn't fucking suck. I'm an Imperial Fist fanboy, but I also cannot stand the color yellow. And bright ass yellow bugs, I feel like I don't like this. Wish their paint scheme was cooler, because that tactic rules. Next, we got the main character bugs, Hive Leviathan, which is like, yeah, it's the big bad. It's the fucking Ultramarines, the Black Legion, the main bug force. These dudes are like the actual Horde faction. They are the billions of tiny bugs charging you on the battlefield. That's their strategy. Something developed by pure trial and error tactics of just throwing as many bugs at a problem until eventually something happens. But they also had a bigger strategy, because one of their main things that they did is they have a lot of bugs. So they tried to spread out as far as possible to create a giant curtain for the shadow and the warp. For those who don't remember, shadow and the warp is a thing the Tyranids have because they're kind of a null space in psychic energy in the warp. So they actually block out psychic communications and warp travel. So they wanted to build a giant curtain to just block off the galaxy. But then Cadia fell, and the rift went shocking forward, and cutting off 2 giant parts of Hively Leviathan. And they still get up to some bullshit. They're the ones who are the cause of a lot of issues in 40k. Like the Octarius War, the devastation of Baal, they fucked up Graia, and they're the main threat during the current edition of Warhammer. These are the current big bad. That's why the box is called Leviathan, because the Leviathan Hive Fleet. But other than that, I mean, they're fine. I personally don't like horde factions. I don't like bringing a lot of minis to my store. That's a lot of transport. That's why I play Custodes. So I only have like a tiny Amazon box full of my army. That's my 2,000 points. It's great. Next up, we got Hive Hydra, and much like their namesake, they're impossible to fucking kill. So they're masters at rapid regeneration and multiplication. You like shoot one of the Tyranids from Hive Hydra, they're probably gonna heal that back, but it gets goofier. Okay, so each Tyranid has like an order in their head in this Hive Fleet, where when they're dead, when they actually die, they send out a signal into like the synaptic link. And they send down a Tyrannocyte, which this giant testicle thing is a Tyranid drop pod that whenever that signal of a dead unit is triggered, the Tyrannocyte will fall from orbit right on the corpses of the dead Nids and spill out more Tyranid warriors. So killing them is a nightmare, because you might finally take out these Tyranid like squad, and then another bigger one drops in their segment, and it probably keeps expanding on that. Much like a Hydra, you know, you cut off the head and 2 more sprout. It's a pretty dope tactic. I think it's really interesting of just airdropping on command more bugs as you need it. Because obviously if they're dying in a location, that location needs more. And then lastly, we got Hive Kronos, which is the newest Tyranid Hive Fleet. This one's actually kind of interesting because they are really close to the Great Rift, and they primarily deal with chaos. Now, that should be a wild statement, because Tyranids don't get any nourishment off chaos. Specifically demon stuff, because demons don't have a physical form. They're purely immaterial, so there's no biomass to eat. As such, they kind of view them as rival predators that they just want to get rid of. So they're really good at ranged combat, because they don't want to get up in front of all these like chaos demons, because it's not doing anything. And they primarily find their like scraps of food on chaos worlds where there's just a bunch of cultists, not enough nourishment. Which actually, Hive Leviathan is like their kind older brother that leaves them planets undefended, not fully killed. Like the population's like, oh, the Nids just left, okay. Well, let's just repopulate, I guess. Like, damn, all our defenses is gone, and then another Hive Fleet comes sailing in to pick up the scraps of a completely undefended planet. So the only reason they survive is because another Hive Fleet is actively giving them the scraps. I think they're neat. I think Tyranids that are adapted to killing an enemy that they can't feed off of is really interesting. I kind of want to read a book or 2 of them actually showing up. I think it might be cool. But yeah, that's Tyranid Hive Fleets. They're not super complicated, they're very basic, and sadly, probably not going to be a thing in 10th. We'll see when more codexes come out. Primarily, I'm hoping that this list might help you figure out what paint scheme you want to paint your Nids. Because the best thing about Hive Fleets, you can actually get a little custom with them. Like I did when I first thought I was going to get into Tyranids. I wanted to do the Crusher Stampede in 9th, and I kind of fell through in multiple renditions of Crusher Stampede, and now it's not a thing. I got a Swarm Lord, I painted them up. I made up my own Hive Fleet called Hive Fleet Osiris, which their whole thing was they entered the galaxy and all they found were like lush jungle bio worlds, like paradise worlds, with no actual human life on it. So primarily they're all plant matter. So, you know, it's just green with all the blades are like thorns. I don't know, if you can fucking steal this if you want. It's just like the orc contrast paint with the Dark Angels like green for plating. It's kind of all that is. It's not a complicated scheme. It took me like an hour. But anyways, yeah, if you like this, like, comment, subscribe, do that fun stuff. Join my membership, and see ya.